Hello, everyone. You're listening to Business as Usual. And today I'm very pleased and honored to have as a guest Nathalie van Haaren, who's a coach and who decided at a very early stage of her career that she doesn't want to be an employee anymore, but she wants to be her own boss. Hello, Nathalie.
Hi, Florina. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited about our talk.
Me too. And we've been, for those that do not know us from this perspective, we've been colleagues to the same coaching school. And then our ways divided. So then I went on my way on the internal coaching, you went on your way, you set up your company. But as this podcast is addressing to all those that have business as a passion, I would like to ask you, why not an employee anymore?
Yeah. I think we have to go a little bit back towards my childhood years. I was always a very, very good student, and I would always do what was asked, and I was never into much trouble. But from the inside, I was also quite rebellious. And I really didn't like when people told me what to do, specifically my parents. And the longer I stayed in the corporate world, the more I saw how the systems that I put myself in were not designed to kind of bring me to my fullest expression of me and what I wanted to do. But I was being, and it's not only the corporate world, it's also, I think, our education system and the way that society has designed these paths that people should be on, rather than attuning to, okay, what is it that you really want? And the more I started realizing that, I learned that within my job, I didn't fully feel myself. But I also realized that my job was never my job that was responsible for making me happy.
Oh yes, very true. And you realized it kind of early, right?
Yeah. And once I realized that, okay, because I was in a good position, I had quickly made my way up into a big corporate, and I was earning good money. I was on the way to buying my first house and living together and kind of doing that whole what is supposed to be done as a young woman. And at one point I realized oh, hold on. And for me, the turning point in my wake up call, you could say, was I burned out. And so this was literally my body saying, you know what, we don't like how you are working. We don't like how you are living your life. You're not building enough rest. You're not really listening or doing enough of the things that really make you happy. Honestly, I also didn't know at one point anymore, what was it that really, filled my heart from the inside out. And the more I started again listening to that, I started to take the reins back and take charge of my life. And surely I started to change different aspects, because I think also change doesn't happen from one night over the next one. You have people that say, okay, I'm going to quit and start a completely different life. But actually, most of us have responsibilities. Most of us have children or a family we need to take care of. And change can also start very, very small.
Yes, indeed. But tell me more about the burnout syndrome and how you realized it, how it manifested, because it is not anymore a taboo in the business world, but it's still very much blurred. No one really knows how to tackle it in the first hand, and most of the time we realize it when it's kind of too late, when it's already there, happening, taking us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now it's at least a more open conversation. If I look 3 years ago, there was still a lot of taboo, but I think also what happens for the people who are in that state is that there is a lot of shame and a lot of I should be doing better. I think a lot of high achievers get burnout because they want to do all of the things at a very good and very high level, right? And thereby they stop almost listening to The first things that manifest in a burnout are actually the signs of your body. That's where you'll know first. And for me, it actually started. I had a very busy period at work, and it's not only work, it's also how you live your life. But I remember I took a holiday with my then partner to go for 1 month to New Zealand. And on that trip, I was sick every single week. I was like, I'm going to relax. And we're going to have such a good time. And you'll know if you're in that spiral of just like on the hamster wheel, when the moment you're relaxed, your whole body just goes into a reflex mode that it's like, okay, you know what? Now I can relax. Now I'm going to start healing myself. Right. So that was already the first signs. I was like, interesting. But I didn't listen to that. Right.
What was your position at that time? Just to understand a little bit the background in a corporation.
Yeah. So back then I was part of the innovation team. So the digital innovation team at, I worked for a chemicals company and a chemical and paint company in the Netherlands. And it was our job to kind of be the innovative part of the company to bring in new technologies, but also bring in new ways of working. So I worked partly as an agile coach, working with teams on how to speed up their delivery cycles and how to improve communication, and how to stimulate a way of working that was not so much top down, but like shared responsibility and actually making things more efficient. So that was part as my work as an agile coach, but I also brought in a lot of design thinking principles, because what we see in the corporate space, or at least what I found, is that we introduce a lot of technologies which are not necessarily the ones that people want or solve the right problem. Right. And we think that with buying a system, we're going to solve most of the problems, but actually it doesn't work that way.
So you were working also with the integration of tools that were not necessarily on the wish list of the employees, but were a given fact.
Yeah. And it becomes a game between, suppliers, the people in charge of buying the systems, and the people who actually use the systems, which you usually don't really have a say in that whole process. So how can you kind of combine that? And the systems ranged for everything from financial to sales to.
So it was I would say, a job that is not a 9 to 5, what I would call it, and you were and still are a high achiever, and I would also call you a high potential, because you're the typical person that a company wants to have it, climbing the career ladder. And on this pressure, on this responsibility from inside and from outside, your body started to say, stop game.
Yeah, it started to say that, and so it was partly how I designed my life, but also partly the culture that existed within the company, right? So I think when you get to a point where you're burnout, when you're literally misaligned, a very good place to start looking as well are, what are the things that I value? Like, have I identified what is truly important to me, and am I living in accordance and in alignment with that? Because what I found was that there were some personal ways that the teams were being led and that the departments were being led, which were against my own personal values. It was different from how I wanted to be in the world and what I found important. And that then you're touching upon, for example, like some of the patriarchal systems within companies. I was usually the youngest only woman within corporate IT departments, and there's a lot of things that I wanted to see differently. And I think, especially for women and people who are these world changers, they want to change the systems from like the inside out. And at one point it just became hard and difficult to do. So rather than telling myself the story, okay, how can I push and change? I asked myself, how can I actually make life a little bit more fun and make it easier for myself? So I left. And what I do want to say with that, because if you don't address some of the foundational symptoms of burning out, you're going to take your own brain from that company and just insert it then into your own company.
Very good point. Yes, I have heard this several times. And again, it's because we are not talking. We are just at the beginning of the discussions. And it's part of this podcast to demystify a little bit what all these concepts were a little bit of shadow is bringing to us. Instead of saying we are human beings, we have our emotions. If our set of values does not match the set of values of the company, it's not enough that we change the company or the position, but we also need to work on ourselves on how to make sure that we are kind of protecting ourselves to burning out. I have heard several people having multiple burnouts in 5 to 7 years, which is a lot, where the body cannot really react in any other way but having a stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you'll see that, the first part that speaks is always the body. But like, I loved how one of my coaches, she explained that when we're dealing with burnout, we're dealing on a physical level with symptoms of burnout. We're dealing on an emotional level, then a societal level. And in the end, we're talking from like a soul level. How aligned are you in your life doing the things that you actually want? And I can absolutely see the pitfalls of people falling into burnout multiple times, because I could see some of the same patterns acting out in the beginning of my business, right? When I wasn't getting the results that I wanted, or when I thought I am not growing fast enough, which is like my higher achiever mindset. Like, no, I want to build my business and it should be further along. Yeah. Like living in accordance with that automatically puts my whole nervous system into like a fight response. And catching myself on those thoughts, okay, there goes my brain again, thinking I'm not further along, thinking I should be doing better, and changing that narrative already towards bringing more acceptance, bringing more compassion to where I am, and choosing differently. And that's the lesson. That's the hardest part. It's not the leaving the company and like starting your own. It's how can you work on yourself to change that.
So you learn it on the harsh way. It happened to you, and then it's a little bit, at least, what turned this motivation into making sure that you can be of help for others, because this moment reaches you as self-employed. You have your own business, and as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, you work with women, you work on prevention of burnout, and you work with high achievers.
Yeah. So this is a big part of the work that I do. A lot of the women are either inside of organizations or are their own bosses. So several of them have their own companies. And what I always want to work towards is like setting goals and work with high ambitious women and bringing in that self-care and preventing them from burning out, because I don't want you to expand and grow and work towards your goals in a way that is not sustainable. And unfortunately, we learn how to, always push harder, perform better. And we are not taught how to take care of ourselves, how to speak to ourselves nicely, how to manage that mind that always thinks we should be further along, we should be doing more, how to learn the voice that says, you know what, next time at a meeting, don't go up for a promotion, or don't put up your hand. And I wasn't even aware about imposter syndrome being a thing until I was like 26, 27, but I had felt it. I had felt it in my body the moment that I had to go give a presentation to like 20 or 30 men, and I was like, oh, who am I to say anything about like agile ways of working or change? Like these people are much older. And it made me feel very alone. So knowing that and understanding that these concepts, one, I am not alone. There's more women that actually suffered from this. And then second, like not making it be an obstacle or a reason to stop going for the things that I want.
Yeah.
Right. Because then we give that power to do whatever the fear is that we're having in that moment.
And then we cannot complain because it's not anymore with us.
Yeah.
But before we move into the business side of what you're currently doing and the differences between the corporate world and being your own boss, I would like to ask you, how have you taken yourself out of this burnout? What have you done?
Yeah, it's, well, the first thing that actually somebody else did for me, because I still had a story like, so the moment I burned out, my body literally said, I didn't want to wake up. I remember that my parents actually came to see me and like I couldn't see phones. I was I couldn't receive any sort of stimuli. And then like Monday came and I thought, I think I'll be okay by then. And they had me talk to the company doctor, and the company doctor said, you know what, you're not coming to work for the next 2 weeks. You're actually staying home. And so it took somebody else to tell me, you know what, you're taking a break. Like this is not normal. And for me, then it still took me like 3, 4, 5 weeks to bring acceptance that I was not gonna work.
So you have had this rejection phase that many people
I was
have.
full on rejection. Yeah, I was not accepting that my team had to take over my work, that people would think that I was weak, and I was like, no, I'm fine. So that was really the first thing that happened. And then slowly, as I started to calm down a little bit, I was looking for ways like, how can I take care of my body? Because I couldn't sleep, because my mind was just on all the time. I found that very difficult. And I started to practice several different ways. So yoga nidra was one I did. I started doing a mindfulness course. And I actually started listening to what my body wanted. So if it wanted to move, I would move. If I wanted to work out, because in the beginning I was like, oh great, I don't have to work. I'm just gonna go to the gym twice a day.
Oh, certainly. From one project to another, and always a high achiever. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were in that moment I decided to move in together with my boyfriend. So I was like, great, I don't have to work, so then I can focus on everything I need to do in the house. And it's a transition period, right? So now that I look back, I was like, oh, Natty, like another thing that happens, like your brain capacity goes down. And I remember we had to like put the paintings up on the wall. We had to measure it, and I had to do like a simple multiplication, and I started crying because I couldn't come up with the number. And it's even like making me emotional to think about it right now, because I was in such a place of denial and of like wanting to stay strong.
Well, we can't realize actually how smart our brains are, because our brain, when it sees it's too much, it will simply shut down and go into the saving mode. I mean, we all have phones, and we know what happens when we have like only 20% of the battery. You run on low battery, so then certain functions, they will just be turned down, and that's exactly what the brain is doing. But no one is really explaining to us that this might happen, even to us, the unstoppable, the super brave, the Wonder Women, the Wonder Men, or the Superman as well. Because one thing is, especially in the corporate world, no one is talking about the burnout by men. I think it's a little bit more related to women, because we tend to be more vulnerable, with more soft skills. And again, I'm putting all the time the commas, because I have seen a number of people and a number of C-suite of managers that had a burnout, but they never discussed about it.
Yeah, I think so. In my case, I do know quite a few men as well that had it.
I mean, isn't it about the time that we say burnout without putting any gender? I mean, it's 2022.
Yeah, it's not a matter of gender, and what I also sometimes think now that the term burnout in itself is used in so many different ways. From saying, oh, I'm a little bit stressed, I think I'm getting burned out, like that's a narrative that we use, towards actually like going to a doctor and saying your body is just not capable to work. So I think the narrative around burning out requires to be very clear on your own definition. And then the gender part, yeah, it's I think that's a whole other topic that we could discuss an episode on.
Yeah, that's true. But coming back to this, I mean, when you worked on yourself and you had external help, and then you decided, okay, I feel well, I feel good, and what happened next?
So yeah, I started practices like body movement, meditation, calming my mind. And I went, in the beginning phase, I went to a psychologist as well. I didn't find that helpful at one point anymore, because I understood where some of my behaviors of perfectionism and like constantly pushing through came from. It's also had to do with my upbringing, and I moved countries a lot as a child because my parents were diplomats. But then I started thinking, how do I get out? Like, how do I actually change some of these behaviors and patterns? And what became important for me was to go back to the place that caused the burnout, that caused the misalignment. It was so important for me to say, you know what, you're going back to the place to understand how you were thinking and what led you to even like go to the burnout. And that was actually the scariest thing ever. Going back to my team, going back to my managers, talking about how I felt. The moment that I did, more people around in the company actually experienced the burnout as well. So I started to understand, like, oh, this is not only my thing, this actually can have meaning and purpose. And once I started to shift that, like, what is the meaning? What is the purpose of me going through this? Then I started doing more of the things that I actually wanted. I gradually increased my work at the company. And in that time, I found time to do things that brought me joy. So I went to teach in quite a remote area in the Netherlands to children from low-income families on how to deal with money. I had no idea that I wanted to do that. And, during my work, I would never do that, but I felt called to go back into teaching. And when I started looking at the red line of like, what are the things that I naturally want to do, even if people don't pay me, it was to help and empower and to teach. And then the sort of like breadcrumbs started aligning. Like, it was not one thing to the next that I thought, you know what, I'm going to become a coach.
No, I think it's a gradual process. I mean, it happened to me as well. And it's still to this extent, I always said, okay, is it something that can be combined? Because I'm not ready to give up entirely on what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and which I enjoy a lot. And same time, it was this incomplete feeling. And I think it's enough that we have a clear need, that we express this internal need, and then the way will develop.
So how is that for you, Florian? Do you want to share a bit about your...
Well, for me, it's as I said, it was just this feeling that I've been taking a lot of advice, of ideas, of learning a lot along the way from different people. And it came at a time when I said, okay, I would like to understand how I can give a little bit back. And it's not by giving advice, that's why I'm not a consultant, but I have found coaching as a way of personal development. And then it's so beautifully as a process. It's so life-changing if one knows how to use it. That is a pity not to be shared with the others. And that's why I specialize in leadership and transition, because business is what I know and what I like. And again, it's a lot about talking to the human capital, the part of the company that is creating the budget, creating the system, and maintaining the business. Making sure that if we maintain ourselves in balance, we are then able to be there and to be present 100% for what we are doing.
Beautiful. I love that. Go ahead.
It came to me because I have, from a place of curiosity, my question to you would be, when you stepped out of the corporate and you entered in this self-employed, your own boss, the question is, how are you for yourself as a boss?
I love that. Yeah. So when the moment that you start surrounding yourself with entrepreneurs, you'll start seeing that actually the worst boss that you can have is yourself.
Why do you say this?
Especially when you like come out of the burnout, because you become, as an entrepreneur, all of the roles in one. You become your own manager, you become your own HR person, you become your own finance person, you become your tech, your tech. There's so many things that you need to learn and give yourself permission to learn as well. That For me, as a boss, when I look back, in the beginning, I stayed a lot in my corporate role and identity, and I could see it by just the language that I was using and what I thought professional meant and what I thought, writing proposals to clients meant, because we're so conditioned to work like that in the corporate space. And entrepreneurship, when you first come into entrepreneurship, your brain doesn't understand that it is literally a playground, that there are no rules. There is no like hey group that comes in with like pay grades, scales, and like who you get when you get your next promotion. There is no performance review except your own capability to be willing to set a goal, go for it, and then reflect and not beat yourself up for it and not give up. Right. So you become all of those things in one. And I love that journey, but it's also a continuous challenge to be the best boss for yourself and to literally create time inside your business to look at it from like a CEO perspective, to say, okay, where do I need tweaking? What gets to be priority right now? And
but what is your biggest, when you think of your business of today, which you have grounded, you have your clients, you work as an entrepreneur, what is the best asset or tool that you currently have?
That I use in my business?
Yes.
Or coaching.
So the purpose of your business is also the biggest tool and asset that helps you.
It is my biggest tool for self-growth. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you don't surround yourself with either mentors or coaches that help you either to think bigger, to expand, or to at some times, not expand, because your growth is actually in creating consistency, in creating calm, in creating stable foundations, right? You need somebody to reflect that on you, because you are your biggest enemy.
Yeah.
And it does not only go for like a coaching business. Like actually my partner, who was also a corporate consultant, a strategy consultant in Amsterdam, he quit his job and he became an entrepreneur in Senegal, where we both moved to 2 years ago. I can see it with him as well. Like your mental health, your brain's capacity at work, which is also tied to how you do life, right? That is your biggest investment. So coaching is the best tool, and also the biggest investments that I've done in my business are in coaching and hiring my own coaches.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, we know it because we have tested on our own, and we work. I know that you are working with a coach. I'm working with a coach myself. It's up to the people. What I'm saying all the time is that we should not think that all the success that the leadership involves, that the CEOs have, and so on, is only dedicated to oneself. It's a team of people. It's a lot of commitment from sides, and it's like professional sport players, that they do have a coach behind them.
Yeah.
And as we are approaching the end of this episode, one thing I would like to ask is for our listeners that are in their mid and 20s, that are high potentials, that they think they are unstoppable, and they are unstoppable unless the body shows something else. What would be your advice to them, especially those that want immediately to have a super career and to climb this corporate ladder?
Yeah, I would encourage them to think about, how are you going to feel when you get there, right? The goal because we always want to achieve something because it's going to make us feel accomplished, proud, happy. And how can you actually integrate and bring that into your life right now, rather than as a treat towards the end?
Beautiful. And if the Nathalie of today would meet the Nathalie of let's say 10 years ago, what would you say to yourself?
Years ago, I was in my early 20s. So I've come to learn that whereas if you asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have given her a piece of advice. Now, if I look at her 10 years ago, I would just love her for the version that she was and honor that, because I think when we look back and constantly try to think this should be better or we should have done this differently, we're not in acceptance. And when I think back at the Natalie 10 years ago, she was wild and free-spirited, and she made many mistakes, and she didn't know what she wanted in life. And she signed up to do a master's program in London because she thought it looked cool on her CV. And yeah, I would just celebrate her for making those choices and not change anything.
Thank you so much for your honesty and for your transparency. I think it's a lot of advice there. Even if people don't realize, we miss the acceptance for ourselves. And the place where you've reached is a beautiful one. So I can only hope that many of us will reach that state of inner joy where we don't have to tick in any boxes in order to be happy. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Florina. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you.
Ciao.